This is my desk. There's a sticky note on it that's been there for 5 days now. It says, send the Patel email. That is it. 3 words. The email itself takes about 10 minutes to write. But I haven't sent that email yet. What I've done instead over the last 5 days is I rearranged the bookshelves a few times. I made a few cups of coffees and I spent an entire evening researching car washing liquids I don't need and I won't buy. If you have ADHD, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I bet someone has called you lazy for it. Maybe you've called yourself that as well. Here's the thing, I'm behavioral and cognitive psychotherapist. I also have ADHD myself, and I want to answer one specific question. If your brain can focus for 6 hours on something that's pointless, why can't it focus on something that actually matters? That's not a rhetorical question. There's an answer. It's been sitting in research papers since 2011, and almost nobody outside academia has ever explained it properly. Let me try. You've probably been told motivation is a feeling, something you wait for, something that disciplined people just have. That's wrong, and I think factually wrong. From a neuroscience point of view, motivation is a brain signal, a specific one. It travels through a specific pathway. We can see it on scans. It's measurably quieter in people with ADHD than in those without it. But hang on, how do we know that? After all, if we're going to tell people their brains are wired differently, we should back this up. And we will. In 2011, a researcher called Nora Volkoff ran a study. She scanned the brains of 86 adults, 45 with ADHD and 41 without. None of the ADHD group had ever taken medication, which matters because medication changes the chemistry of the brain. And she wanted to see the ADHD brains in their natural state. She looked at 2 specific structures, the midbrain and something called the nucleus accumbens. These 2 structures are part of what we call the dopamine-reward-pathway. In the ADHD group, both structures showed less dopamine activity. And this is the part that gets me every time. The people whose brains showed the weakest signals were also the people who scored lowest on the motivation in real life. The brain measure and the life measure lined up very closely. So when someone tells you to just push through, they're actually asking you to push through with a reward pathway that is naturally understimulated. It's not fair, and it never was. But this is where it gets weirder, because it's not that ADHD brains can't feel reward. We can. That's not the problem. The problem is anticipation. Here is what I mean. When the reward actually arrives, when we eat the cake or watch an episode of our favorite TV show, our ADHD brains light up just like anyone else's, and sometimes even more, so we do feel pleasure just fine. What we struggle with is the part that comes before, the bit where your brain says, if you do this now, you'll feel good in 2 hours. That signal, the bridge between effort and the reward later, is the bit that's quiet. This means that I know I'll feel better after I exercise doesn't actually work for us. Not because we're stupid. Intellectually, we know it's good for us. But knowing isn't the same as feeling. The future reward stays abstract, and it doesn't pull us forward the way it's supposed to. This is called the reward anticipation deficit, and it's one of the most replicated findings in ADHD research. There are dozens of studies. I made a video on this. You can check that here. Okay, so if anticipation is the problem, why can ADHD brains hyperfocus for hours on the wrong things? Because of the second piece of the puzzle. And this is the bit nobody told me until recently. Bear with me. There's a researcher called Edmund Sonneger-Bach. I hope I'm pronouncing this right. In 2005, he published a paper proposing something he called delay aversion. This isn't just disliking waiting. It's a measurable physical response in ADHD brains. Waiting for a reward doesn't feel natural to us. It feels actively uncomfortable. So our brains do what brains usually do and move towards whatever stimulates them right now. Video games, points, sounds, wins, all happening in real time. Online shopping, new thing here, new thing there, new things everywhere. Scrolling, you never know what's coming next, which is exactly the kind of unpredictability that floods our quiet reward pathway with signal. Searching car washing liquids at 11 p.m. These activities aren't grabbing your attention because you're addicted or weak or undisciplined. They're grabbing your attention because they finally turn up the volume on a signal your brain has been straining to hear all day. Meanwhile, the email sits there. The reward for sending it is in the future. Your brain can't really feel it, so you won't start typing. This was the moment I realized I am not broken, and I hope it does the same for you. However, I want to be careful here. I'm not handing you an excuse, because ADHD isn't your fault, but it is your responsibility. What I'm doing instead is handing you an explanation. Those are different things. And I think a lot of ADHD content blurs them on purpose because it gets clicks, and I don't want to do that. The standard productivity advice, make a list, block your calendar, use willpower, push through, that advice was built for neurotypical brains with reward pathways that are firing well. It's not a bad advice, it's just advice that doesn't work for ADHD brains. In other words, when that advice fails for you, it's not because you failed, it's because the advice was never designed for your wiring. And that's a hard thing to hold. For a lot of people watching, it lands as grief. Years of trying the wrong tools and being told the tools work fine and you were the problem. If that's where you are allowed to feel grief. I'm not going to give you a list of strategies today. That's for future videos. Today's just about understanding, but I want to leave you with one shift in thinking. Just one. Stop asking, why can't I make myself do this? And start asking, how can I make this task feel more like the things that I can do? Can you add interests, music, a nice pen, a conversation while you work? Can you add urgency, a timer, a friend waiting? Can you add novelty? A different room, a new tool? Can you add immediate reward? A small thing right after, not at the end of the day or the week, right after this one bit. These aren't tricks. They're not productivity hacks. They're just you giving your reward pathway a signal it can actually hear. In other words, you're not making yourself do the task. You're making the task workable for the brain you actually have. Tomorrow morning, you're going to face a task you don't want to do. Maybe an email, maybe a form, or even something that is more important, something bigger. The old voice will say, stop being lazy and just do it. But you'll try a different approach this time. Just try saying, my brain needs a signal it can hear. What signal can I give it? Then add one thing, just one. Music, a timer, a friend on a call. You may still struggle, and that's fine because the point isn't perfection. The point is to stop fighting your brain and start working with it. That can make all the difference further down the road. Next week, we're going to talk about time blindness, why deadlines don't work the way they're supposed to, and why you can lose 3 hours and not feel a minute pass. Same time, same place. I will see you then.